Hey, Nish here, and today I'm reviewing the Boss GT1 guitar multi-effects pedal. I've had this pedal for a little while, had a good chance to use it, and today I'm going to take you through its features, how I use it, and some pros and cons about it. Now, this is a smaller version, basically, of the Boss GT100, and it's got quite a small footprint, as you can see. It measures just 30 centimeters across and weighs just over a kilogram, and it's designed to be easily slipped into a gig bag. Starting off by running through the I/O, we've got a 1/4" jack input from your guitar, a 3.5mm auxiliary in for playing tracks through the pedal, a 3.5mm headphone jack, or you could use that for a sort of speaker type output. Then you've got a stereo output and 1/4" jack for sending to an amp or what have you, but you can use that as mono. Finally, there's the option to add extra expression or control pedals, which will make more sense as I talk about the features. And lastly, you have a USB Type B output, so you can connect this board to a computer and use it as an audio interface. Now, the board doesn't come supplied with a power adapter. You will have to buy a fairly standard 9V 500 milliamp power supply, but it is also powerable by AA batteries. 4 AA batteries in here will give you up to 7 hours of battery life, which is quite impressive. On the front of the board, we're greeted by a myriad of buttons. On a basic level, a lot of the effect buttons will enable or disable the respective feature. There's 3 switches that you press with your feet, as well as an expression pedal. The foot switches can be customized, but by default, they're going to be used to switch between the patches on the pedal and also enabling distortion. The 3 dials are used to change the various parameters that each effect has. Now, before I dive into the features of this pedal board, please do subscribe if you like what you're seeing so far. It helps the channel grow and get the video to more people, and I'd really appreciate it. So this board has a lot of features, but first off, I want to mention that you do have the option to either connect it to a guitar amp, a powered speaker, headphones, or PC, so it's highly versatile. The way it works is there's 99 pre-configured patches and 99 custom patches on the device. Now, what is a patch? Essentially, this is a virtual pedal board which has its own signal chain which you can customize. This signal chain consists of about 6 or 7 different effects where you can see each of the buttons on the front corresponds to a various effect. Now, I'm not going to talk you through every single effect that this board has because we'd be here all day, but I will give you a general run through of each category of effect. At the front of the signal chain, you have your first FX block, of which there are 2. Now, in this slot, you can actually put one of about 20-30 different effects. At the start of the signal chain, what you'll probably want to be doing is putting effects that change the character of the sound of the guitar quite a lot. So for example, this could be things like an acoustic guitar simulator, an octave pedal. The next main feature category is overdrive and distortion. Hopefully you're familiar with what that is. Again, there's a lot of different options here. You can go from your various crunch effects to like metal lead effects, and there's a wide variety. The next category of effects is the preamps. Now, where does this come in? Well, if you're using this pedal board with headphones or a powered speaker output, you can basically simulate different types of amplifier using this pedal board. If you're plugging into a guitar amplifier directly, you might not want to use this because the guitar amplifier has its own preamp already, so you're stacking up double, but you could use it to shape the sound further. FX2 or mod is your second FX block where you can put one of the many 20-25 effects. Now, in this part of the signal chain, you'd probably want to use effects that modulate the sound. We're talking about things like chorus, flanger, phaser, those type of effects where you typically would only be using one of them. You're probably not going to stack on a load of them at the same time. Lastly, you have reverb and delay, so you can enable both of these. Both of them, again, have a lot of different options, a lot of different parameters you can tweak. Last but not least, there is the expression pedal going at the very end, and you can put this as a typical wah type pedal or a pitch shift. By default, it acts as a volume pedal. A couple of other features to mention is the GT1 does have a built-in 30-second looper, so you can access this by pressing 2 of the foot switches at the same time and then using the control switch to control the start, stop, and looping function. There's also a built-in tuner which will mute the output as you enter it, and again, you enter this by pressing 2 of the buttons at the same time. Very useful to have. It basically simulates what a tuner pedal would do on a traditional pedal board. Now, I won't give a full tutorial of how to use this board, though if you're interested, do let me know. There are a lot of videos out there that cover various topics, although some of them are admittedly a little slow, so maybe I could give it a shot myself. The way way I tend to use this board is what you'd call a stomp box type mode. And the idea of this is to try and make it mimic a traditional pedal board. Now, how do I do this? Well, as I mentioned, these foot switches are customizable. You're not stuck with having the up and down only changing the patch. You can actually customize them to enable and disable various effects in the chain. So the setup I tend to have is the first pedal will control FX1, so it will turn it on or off. The second one turns on FX2, so maybe, enabling or disabling a chorus, for example. And then finally, the last control switch, I could use that to enable the distortion and maybe also delay. So that could be a quick button press to go into a kind of a soloing mode. I can then use this pedal board with my looper and very quickly change between different sounds and, put down maybe use an octave pedal to put down a bass line and then put some clean guitar over that and then go into solo mode. So it's quite a powerful configuration, because if you think about it, with the 99 custom patches you've got on here, you've essentially got 99 custom pedal boards that you can make up from scratch. The only con is, of course, you're limited to these 3 buttons, but as I mentioned, you can plug in an extra control foot switch on the back, though they are a little bit pricey. You've got like the Boss FS6 and FS7, which come in about 50, 60 pounds. As always, let's jump into some pros and cons. Now, the first thing is the sheer number of effects you get with this pedal board. You have a lot of flexibility to play around and customize the effects. You've got 99 different patches to set up, 99 different virtual pedal board setups. So you really can spend a lot of time tinkering around and getting a setup that you like. This, however, does come with a direct con that I'd like to address now, and this is what the title of the video refers to. With this great flexibility comes great complexity, and ultimately, you do have to spend a bit of time getting to grips with using the board and navigating around. It's not as straightforward as a normal pedal board setup where you can just turn on and off each individual pedal. You really do need to learn the skill of navigating around the menus. To be honest, understandably, for a lot of people, and maybe even myself, it's not something you really, you want to spend more time playing. You don't want to spend a load of time flicking through a manual and watching videos just to learn how to use the thing. But if you do invest that time, then you're rewarded with a very flexible pedal setup. Moving back to the good stuff, this board is incredibly versatile, and not just in the sense that you've got all these features, but in the number of outputs you've got. So you can put this into a computer as an audio interface, you can put it into a guitar amp, you can put it into headphones, you can put it into a powered speaker, and lastly, the portability and the fact that it has a very respectable battery life when powered by AA batteries means this could be highly suited for maybe a busker or someone traveling around a lot. However, there are some cons, of course. Now, the major one that I found, which is quite an annoyance, is, you want to probably start off using those pre-configured patches to figure out what kind of sounds this board can produce. But one of the biggest problems is that all of these patches have wildly varying volume levels. So you'll be on one patch, like a clean one, and you'll be like, oh, this is nice. And then you'll flick over to some lead one and it will be ear-piercingly loud. Now, you can customize the volume of each patch individually, independently to the master volume of the pedal. But for whatever reason, out of the box, none of these patches are, say, normalized with the same volume. And it would have been a nice feature to have, but ultimately what you probably will have to end up doing is when you're flicking through and get deafened by something, you'll have to turn down the volume of that patch and save over it just so it doesn't happen again. Another gripe is you've only got 2 of those FX blocks to play around with, so this could potentially limit the options. Personally, I don't think it limits the options that much because you're not typically going to be using that many different modulation effects at the same time, but it's worth mentioning if you have some wild plans where you're going to stack different effects on top of each other, then bear in mind that you've only got those 2 blocks to play around with. So I know this video has already got relatively long, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about some other options you might want to consider. Now, first off, if you like Boss, but you're not liking the complexity of the GT1 and all the menus and the dials that change depending on what you're on, you might want to look at the ME series. I've reviewed the ME50 a little while back. Their latest is the ME80. Now, these have probably a similar kind of range of features. They're not quite as customizable, but the trade-off is that every effect on there has a dial associated with it. So you don't have to go through menus, you just change the dial to the part you want to change. For something more similar to the GT1 by another company, there's the Zoom G3N and G5N. They come at a similar price and they seem to have a similar range of effects and I/O options, but worth having a look at if there's something about them that suits you more. But with that, that is everything I wanted to cover. I hope this review has been useful. I'd like to summarize and say, you know, at the price point the GT1 comes in at about £160, €160 or so, I think it's a really well featured pedal board, and it could easily be a one-stop shop. If you're not a super duper effects head person, I think it could easily fulfill all the requirements your average beginner intermediate guitar player could have. That being said, this does come with the caveat that you do need to be willing to invest a little bit of time to learn how the board works, to learn how to set up a patch from scratch, because I think that's probably the best feature here. You've got the ability to fully customize a sound from the ground up. And, you know, there are tutorials out there. I mean, in fact, do let me know if you're interested in potentially seeing some tutorials on the GT1. I could certainly think about, you know, trying to condense the knowledge I have and try and communicate it in a succinct way and get you started with this pedal. As for who it's for, well, if you're a, you know, beginner who wants to get to grips with using different types of guitar effects, then I think it's a really handy way to explore. And, you know, you could buy it and have a play around, and if you don't like it, sell it on for a little bit less, because it's a popular pedal and it doesn't lose too much of its value. So thanks again for watching. Hope it's been useful. Drop any comments or questions that you may have, and I'll catch you in the next one.